The neon-stained corridors of Nexus Station hummed with lethal possibility. Vice Commander Exthos of the Krithek Brotherhood stalked through the crowded marketplace, his crystalline scales refracting the gaudy light displays of 1,000 alien vendors. Behind him, 6 of his most trusted enforcers moved in perfect formation, their ceremonial armor marking them as members of the galaxy's most feared mercenary company. The message had arrived 3 standard cycles ago, a high-priority contract with triple the usual payment. Exthos had been skeptical at first. The best contracts never came through official channels, but the credit verification had checked out, and the Brotherhood's coffers could use replenishing after their last disastrous mission in the Crimson Nebula. The meeting location was exactly what he'd expected. The Broken Tusk, a dive bar notorious for its discretion and its heavily armed security droids. The establishment's owner, a massive Cronin named Dex, nodded respectfully as Exthos and his team entered. The Vice Commander's facial plates shifted in what passed for a smile among his kind. The Cronin still owed him for that business with the stellar Cardinal last season. Upper level, Dex rumbled, his stone-like skin grinding as he gestured toward the private booths. "Your client's been waiting." Exthos flicked his primary tongue, tasting the air. Fear, anticipation, and something else, desperation. Interesting. Desperate clients paid well, but came with their own risks. He signaled 2 of his enforcers to secure the perimeter, while the rest followed him up the gravity lift to the 2nd floor. The client sat alone in a shielded booth, wrapped in an environmental suit that concealed their species. Smart. Exthos approved of such precautions, even if they were ultimately futile. The Brotherhood always learned their clients' true identities. It was simply good business. "Vice Commander," the figure's voice came through a modifier, smooth and genderless. "Your reputation precedes you." Exthos settled his massive frame into the reinforced chair across from the client. "As does your credits. Let's discuss the target." A holographic display flickered to life between them, showing trade routes through the Outer Rim territories. One particular route pulsed an angry red. "A trader has been disrupting our operations in this sector," the client explained, manipulating the display to zoom in on a remote mining colony. "Initial reports suggested a small-time operator, but they've cost us 3 shipments in the past month alone. Our own security forces have proven inadequate." Exthos studied the data scrolling past. The target's ship registry was clearly falsified, but the pattern of their movements suggested both intelligence and resources. "You've attempted elimination already." 2 teams. Neither returned. That got his attention. The Vice Commander's secondary eyes narrowed as he reassessed the contract's generous payment. Their species. Unknown. The environmental suits they wear masked their life signs. One of Exthos's enforcers, a young hotshot named Scray, clicked his mandibles in amusement. "A coward who hides their face. This should be simple enough." The client's suited head turned toward the young warrior. "We thought the same. The last transmission we received from our 2nd team was them screaming about someone ripping through their ship's hull with mining equipment." Exthos felt his scales ripple with interest. Physical strength meant little in modern combat, but the psychological impact of such a display. This target had style. Terms. Standard elimination contract. Half now, half upon confirmation. Bonus for bringing back any data about their operation. The client's gloved hands moved through the holographic display, pulling up the official contract. "We don't care about their ship or equipment. We just want them gone." The Vice Commander spent several moments reviewing the contract's details. The payment was enough to upgrade the Brotherhood's entire fleet. Even splitting it among his warriors, they'd all live like planetary governors for a standard year. "The Krithek Brotherhood accepts your contract," Exthos declared, pressing his scaled palm to the authentication panel. His enforcers straightened with pride. This would be a hunt worthy of their talents. As they left the Broken Tusk, young Scray was already boasting about how he'd spend his share. But Exthos felt an unfamiliar sensation in his thermal pits, a slight chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. Something about this contract felt wrong, like the calm before a solar storm. Have the analysts begin deep background research, he ordered his intelligence officer. I want to know everything about this sector's shipping patterns for the past 3 cycles. Concerned, Vice Commander, the officer asked. Exthos watched the station's artificial sun begin its programmed descent, casting long shadows through the transparent dome above. 2 teams lost against a single traitor. No, not concerned, but I intend to know exactly what kind of prey we're hunting before we strike. If only he'd thought to check the species designation first. Gamma 6 wasn't just hostile. It was actively trying to kill them. Exthos watched through his atmospheric scope as another acid storm rolled across the mining colony's outer perimeter, droplets eating through the native rock like hungry parasites. His team had lost 2 sensor arrays already, the sensitive equipment dissolving into useless puddles of corroded metal. This is madness, Scoutmaster Wheelera hissed through their secured channel. No sentient being chooses to operate in these conditions. The atmospheric composition alone should make sustained operations impossible. She had a point. Gamma 6 atmosphere was a toxic cocktail of corrosive gases, and its electromagnetic storms played havoc with standard navigation systems. The Brotherhood's advanced environmental suits were rated for extreme conditions, but even they showed signs of strain after just 6 hours of deployment. Their target, however, seemed completely at ease. Through the scope, Exthos watched the lone figure maneuver a massive mining platform, Mark 7, across the treacherous terrain. The MP-7 was known throughout the galaxy as a notoriously temperamental piece of equipment. Most mining operations required at least 3 engineers just to keep one running. Yet their quarry operated it with the casual confidence of someone taking a pleasant stroll. Checking the time logs again, Yelera reported, her voice tight with disbelief. They've been working continuously for 27 hours now. No breaks, no signs of fatigue. The suit's environmental readings suggest their core temperature and vital signs remain stable despite the external conditions. Young Skrake clicked his mandibles impatiently, probably using stimulants. Every species has them. No, Hexthos replied, his thermal pits detecting something odd about their target's heat signature. Stimulants leave traces. This is natural endurance. The team fell silent as they watched their quarry navigate the MP-7 through a particularly narrow canyon. The machine's massive treads scraped against the rock walls, sending showers of sparks into the acidic air. Any miscalculation would result in the entire rig becoming trapped or worse, crushed by the unstable geology. Instead of slowing down, their target increased speed. Exthos felt his scales ripple as the MP-7 threaded the needle with millimeter precision, even adding a casual spin at the end that shouldn't have been possible with such heavy machinery. The maneuver saved several minutes of travel time, but should have torn the rig's suspension to shreds. They're whistling, Yelera reported incredulously, adjusting her audio filters. Some kind of melody. And, are they doing maintenance while driving? The scope confirmed it. Their target had the MP-7 on some kind of autopilot while they hung off the side, casually replacing what looked like a power coupling. The acid rain sizzled against their environmental suit, but they ignored it completely, focusing instead on the repair job while continuing to whistle that maddeningly cheerful tune. New atmospheric alert, their environmental officer called out. Incoming pressure wave. Category 3. Category 3 pressure waves could flatten buildings. The Brotherhood's position was protected by a natural rock formation, but the MP-7 stood exposed on the plains, its tall frame a perfect target for the destructive force. They'll have to abandon the equipment, Scry said. No way to secure it in time. Their target's response defied all logic. Instead of running, they calmly rotated the MP-7's main drilling arm, adjusting its angle precisely as the wave approached. The massive pressure front hit the ray head-on and split around it like water around a blade, the drilling arm acting as a makeshift deflector. Impossible, Yulera breathed. They calculated the deflection angle in seconds, without computers. Exthos felt that strange chill again. In all his years of hunting, he'd never seen someone treat a Category 3 wave as a minor inconvenience. Even more disturbing was how their target immediately went back to whistling and working, as if nothing unusual had happened. Vice Commander, his intelligence officer's voice carried an unusual note of concern. I've been analyzing their work patterns. They're not just mining. The excavation points form a pattern. I think they're building something. Exthos zoomed his scope in further, watching their seemingly inexhaustible quarry begin yet another repair while doing one-armed push-ups. No, he replied softly. They're not building. They're preparing. The question is, for what? The answer would come soon enough, and none of them were ready for it. The intercepted transmission crackled through the Brotherhood's command center, cutting through the professional silence like a plasma torch through hull plating. Hey Mom, sorry I missed the game yesterday. The Eagles better step up their defense if they want to make playoffs this year. Mining's going good though. You wouldn't believe the mineral deposits out here. Tell Dad his modified drilling rig design is working perfectly. Exthos felt every scale on his body stand on end. The language was unmistakable. English. More specifically, American English, with its distinctive casual patterns. His cybernetic arm twitched involuntarily, phantom pain shooting through circuits that had replaced flesh 20 years ago. Sir, Scray looked up from his monitoring station, mandibles twitching in confusion. The target's using some kind of primitive communication method. Should we evacuate? Exthos's voice carried the weight of old battles. Now, the younger mercenaries exchanged bewildered looks. Their command center was a masterpiece of stealth technology, shielded against every known detection method. Even if their target intercepted the transmission trace, no single operator could possibly. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but Exthos was already moving. He grabbed his ceremonial helmet, the one he never wore anymore because of the scars, and slammed it onto the command table's holoprojector. Look, he ordered, activating the helmet's memory crystal. A hologram sprang to life, showing a battlefield from 2 decades ago. A Krithak assault squad, 30 strong, advancing on what appeared to be a primitive human outpost. This was my first encounter with their kind. The younger warriors leaned forward, eager to see the Brotherhood's legendary combat prowess. Instead, they watched in stunned silence as a single human figure emerged from the outpost. The recording showed the human armed with nothing but salvaged mining equipment and several containers of what Exthos now knew was called coffee. What followed made several of the younger warriors emit distress pheromones. Impossible, Scray whispered as the recording ended. No single being cooled. That's why we're leaving. Exthos cut him off. Our target, Jackson Miller, is human, and he's been aware of us since we landed. As if to confirm his words, their communication system suddenly activated on its own. A cheerful voice filled the command center. Hey there. Just wanted to let you folks know you've got about 10 minutes before that acid storm hits your position. Your northern sensor array is looking pretty rough. Might want to grab it before it dissolves completely. Also, your coffee maker's garbage. I've got some real earth beans if you want to try the good stuff. Yulera, who had survived the Terra Consortium War herself, was already packing essential equipment. How long? She asked Exthos. How long has he been watching us? The whole time, their intelligence officer answered, his scales pale with realization. Those mining patterns we've been tracking. They spell out welcome in English. He's been sending us messages through geological formations. The command center erupted into frantic activity. Young warriors who had scoffed at their elders' warnings now moved with urgent precision, breaking down equipment and securing data cores. Exthos remained still, his cybernetic arm aching with memories. Sir, His intelligence officer called out, "You should see this. We finally cracked the target's background check." The holographic profile that appeared showed a smiling human male with what X thus recognized as a beard. Jackson Miller, age 32, former combat engineer with the Human Expeditionary Force, specialized in adaptive technology and resource utilization under extreme conditions. Current occupation listed simply as independent contractor. Independent contractor. Ylara laughed bitterly. That's what they called the one who took out our entire strike force on New Madison. Used our own drop pods to make an orbital defense grid. Their communications crackled again. By the way, whoever encrypted your background check protocols did a decent job. But you might want to update your quantum cipher keys more often. Oh, and there's some great coffee waiting at your evacuation point. Figured you'd head for the southern ridge. Best defensible position within range. Exthos felt a grudging respect beneath his terror. Of course, the human knew their fallback protocols. He'd probably learned their entire tactical doctrine while they were still setting up surveillance. Vice Commander, Scray asked quietly. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. The stories about humans, are they all true? Exthos touched his cybernetic arm, remembering the Marine who'd given it to him. No, young one. The stories make them sound less dangerous than they are. The emergency council chamber aboard the Brotherhood's stealth ship crackled with tension. Dozens of warriors, divided by experience and fear, faced each other across the circular table. The holographic display between them showed their target casually bench-pressing a mining rig's power converter. Equipment that weighed as much as a small shuttle. "This is absurd," Scray declared, his youthful mandibles clicking with frustration. "One human, alone on a death world, and we're considering retreat. We have plasma cannons, neural disruptors, enough firepower to level a small continent." The security feed continued playing. Jackson Miller, still whistling, moved on to using industrial drilling chains as jump ropes for what he called his light workout. "You weren't there during the war." Yllara's voice carried the hollow tone of a warrior who'd seen too much. She activated her recon visor's archived footage. The assembled warriors watched as a human settlement transformed overnight. This was Outpost 7. We thought we had them surrounded. The footage showed simple agricultural equipment being converted into devastating weaponry. Fertilizer tanks became explosive devices. Irrigation systems were repurposed into plasma coolant networks. Farming robots transformed into combat units. Their adaptation speed is unmatched in the galaxy. Ylara continued. Everything they touch becomes a potential weapon. Every defeat makes them stronger. They don't just survive. They evolve. Exthos stepped forward, his cybernetic arm gleaming under the chamber's lights. "Show them," he commanded their intelligence officer. "Show them what Miller's been doing while we watch." New holograms sprang to life, displaying the mining colony's infrastructure. Red highlights appeared across the projection, indicating modifications. The younger warriors' bravado faltered as they realized the extent of their target's preparations. "Every mining laser has been calibrated to match our shield frequencies," the intelligence officer explained, his scales pale. "The acid collection tanks, positioned to create a kill zone that would melt through our armor in seconds. He's even got backup systems we can't identify. Technology that looks like a fusion of our own designs with human innovation." "But how?" a young warrior demanded. "We've been watching him constantly." The footage answered for them. While they'd been observing Miller's obvious displays of strength, his automated systems had been quietly rebuilding the entire facility. Every apparent break in his routine had served a purpose. Even his casual repairs had been strategic improvements. "Look at his efficiency." Exthos pointed to a time-lapse showing Miller's work patterns. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Everything serves multiple purposes. That whistling. He's using the sound waves to map cave systems. The morning exercises, testing load-bearing capacities of new equipment. Miller's voice crackled through their communications again. "Hey folks, just finished setting up the coffee maker from your probe parts. Got to say, your metallurgy is amazing. Made the perfect heating element. Anyone want to come try it? Promise I disabled all the weaponized features. Well, most of them. The chamber erupted into chaos. Younger warriors argued for immediate attack, while veterans began citing Brotherhood protocols for mission abortion. X thus let them argue, his attention fixed on another security feed. Miller had started what humans called target practice, casually throwing mining spikes through gaps in rapidly moving drilling equipment. He's not showing off. X thus realized aloud, silencing the chamber. He's calibrating. Every display of strength, every casual demonstration. He's testing exactly what he can do with the resources at hand, learning his environment's limits. And our limits, Wailera added quietly. The coffee maker. He didn't just repurpose our probe. He replicated our technology, improved it, and demonstrated he could do it casually. It's a warning. The chamber's displays suddenly shifted, showing Miller taking a break from his exercise. He sat down with a steaming cup of coffee, looked directly at their hidden camera, and winked. That's impossible, the intelligence officer whispered. That camera's quantum shielded. He can't. He's human. Exthos cut him off. Impossible is what they do best. The question isn't whether we can complete this contract anymore. It's whether we can survive attempting it. In the resulting silence, they watched Miller begin constructing something new from their probe's remains. None of them wanted to guess what impossible thing it would become. Following the ancient traditions of the Krithek Brotherhood was supposed to be a formality. The warning notice, a final courtesy before elimination, had been transmitted using their most secure quantum-encrypted channels. X thus expected either silence or defiance. Instead, they got gift baskets. How? Security Chief K'tol demanded, examining the perfectly customized care packages that had appeared in their command center. These are Centaurian sugar crystals, my favorite childhood treat. They're not even exported anymore. Each member of the Brotherhood had received a similar package, containing items that shouldn't exist outside their private memories. Ilara found her collection of rare battle poems, lost during the Terra Consortium War. Scray discovered his first molt shell, which he'd thought destroyed in a training accident. The note attached was handwritten on actual paper, a luxury few could afford. Thanks for the heads up. Figured you guys could use some comforts from home while camping out in this acid rain. By the way, your quantum encryption is pretty good, but you might want to update your protocols. I've attached some suggestions for improvement, complete with diagrams. P.S. K'tol, those sugar crystals are actually from your mom's original recipe. She was kind enough to share it when I explained I was working with her favorite offspring. Lovely lady. We had a great chat about your childhood adventures. Jack Miller. Exthos watched his hardened warriors, veterans of 100 campaigns, reduced to stunned silence. The human hadn't just breached their security. He'd mapped their entire lives, made contact with their families, and reconstructed treasured memories, all while they thought they were surveilling him. Their communications officer, recovering from the shock of finding his grandmother's ceremonial blade, lost in a space battle 3 cycles ago, discovered something even more disturbing. Sir, our observation post. It's been under surveillance the entire time. A holographic display activated, showing their position from multiple angles. The footage was crisp, professional, and time-stamped from the moment they landed. Miller had been watching them watch him, documenting their every move while making it look like they had the tactical advantage. Check this out. Miller's voice suddenly came through their systems, casual as ever. I compiled a highlight reel of your best moments. The sunset shot of Exthos planning strategy, totally frame-worthy. And Scray's morning combat practice. Your form is great, but I notice you favor your left side. Included some exercises that might help with balance. A data packet arrived containing not just surveillance footage, but detailed personal assessments of each warrior. Combat strengths, psychological profiles, favorite foods, family connections, even childhood nicknames. Miller had turned their reconnaissance mission into his own intelligence-gathering operation. Vice Commander. Catal's voice shook slightly. The encryption suggestions he sent, they're decades ahead of our current systems. He's not just showing us he can break our security. He's teaching us how to improve it. Yilara, examining the technical documents, hissed in shock. These improvements, they're customized to our specific technology. He learned our entire security architecture while dismantling it. The processing power required, the multitasking capability. Another message arrived, this time with attached images. The Brotherhood's warriors going about their daily routines, but from angles that should have been impossible given their stealth systems. Almost forgot. Miller's text scrolled across their screens. Caught some great shots of you guys during operations. Don't worry, I edited out the classified stuff. Wouldn't want to compromise operational security. Though you might want to adjust your stealth field modulation on the eastern perimeter. The harmonic resonance is pretty distinctive. Exthos stared at a perfect image of himself in what he'd thought was a completely private moment, meditating in his quarters. The angle, the lighting, it was almost artistic in its composition. Sir, Scray had lost all traces of his earlier bravado. He's not just gathering intelligence. This is, what do humans call it? Scrapbooking. Exthos replied grimly, remembering briefings about human social habits. He's treating us like family. The implications hit them all at once. Miller hadn't just defeated their security. He'd adopted them. Made them part of his human tendency to collect, protect, and improve everything around him. They weren't just fighting a human anymore. They were being recruited. The Brotherhood's stealth probe was their finest piece of reconnaissance equipment, a masterpiece of engineering that cost more than most planetary defense systems. Its quantum-shifted hull could bypass any known detection grid. Its sensors could analyze molecular structures from orbit. Even its self-destruct system was a marvel, designed to leave no traceable remains. It lasted exactly 6 minutes and 43 seconds after deployment. Fascinating design. Miller's voice echoed through their command center as they watched their probe being casually disassembled in midair by what appeared to be repurposed mining drones. The quantum shift harmonics are especially elegant. Though you might want to adjust the phase variance, it creates a pretty distinctive ripple in the ultraviolet spectrum. Exthos watched in horrified fascination as their probe's components were sorted, analyzed, and immediately repurposed. Miller worked with the casual efficiency of someone doing a relaxing hobby. Whistling what they'd learned was an Earth song called "Take Me Home, Country Roads." The metallurgy on these sensor arrays is amazing. Miller continued, already fabricating new components from the probe's remains. Mind if I borrow the design principle? Been wanting to upgrade my coffee maker's temperature control. Yilara, monitoring the sensor feeds, made a strangled sound. He's not just copying our technology, he's improving it. Those modifications he's making to the quantum shift matrix, they're solving stability issues our engineers have been working on for decades. The transformation happened with breathtaking speed. Within minutes, parts of their probe had been integrated into Miller's mining operation, enhancing everything from navigation systems to atmospheric processors. The remaining components were rapidly taking shape into something else entirely. Sir, their engineering officer reported, scales paling as he analyzed the data. The energy efficiency of our systems just increased by 47%. He uploaded the improvements through our own probe's command protocols. A new message flashed across their screens. Hope you don't mind the tweaks. Figured while I was reverse engineering everything, might as well optimize a bit. By the way, who designed your power distribution grid? The minimalist approach to heat dissipation is brilliant. Scray, who had suggested the probe deployment, watched in stunned silence as Miller completed his work. Where their multi-billion credit stealth probe had been, there now stood an elaborately modified coffee brewing station, complete with cup warmers and what appeared to be a milk frother made from sensor arrays. Want to test it out? Miller called cheerfully. The quantum-shifted heating element maintains perfect temperature control. Plus, I used your probe's molecular analyzers to ensure optimal extraction of flavor compounds. Oh, and don't worry about the weapon systems. I only kept the defensive ones. The youngest member of their strike team, a rookie named Vivkar, unexpectedly broke protocol. He walked straight into Miller's facility, drawn by the enticing aroma now wafting through his suit's filters. The Brotherhood watched in collective shock as their newest warrior sat down for coffee with their target. "This is..." Vivkar's voice came through their comms, filled with wonder. "This is the most perfect beverage I've ever consumed. The molecular balance, it's calibrated specifically for Krithak taste buds." Miller's grin was visible even through his environmental suit. "Noticed you folks have more sensitive receptors in the upper palate. Had to modify the extraction process a bit, but the results seemed worth it. Anyone else want to try? I made enough for everyone." Exthos felt the situation slipping further from his control. Their most advanced technology had been dismantled, improved, and turned into a hospitality station. Their youngest warrior was now enthusiastically discussing brewing techniques with their target. And worst of all, the coffee's aroma was proving irresistible, even through his suit's filters. Fascinating, isn't it? Ilar amused, watching more of their warriors succumb to curiosity. Humans don't just adapt technology. They domesticate it. Turn weapons into comfort, threats into hospitality. Miller's voice crackled through their comms again. "Hey, while you're deciding about the coffee, want to see what I can do with an actual weapons system? No pressure, but I've got some ideas about your plasma cannon efficiency ratings." The Brotherhood collectively shuddered, realizing that their demonstration of force had become a technology-sharing workshop. And somewhere in their command center, their backup probe began mysteriously disassembling itself, its components already realigning into something new, something improved, something distinctly human in its infinite adaptability. The war room fell into absolute silence as Exthos activated his personal memory crystal. The holographic display flickered to life, showing footage that hadn't been viewed in 20 years. Warning markers flashed across the screen. Classified. Highest clearance required. Terra Consortium War Archives. What you're about to see was locked away by mutual agreement of all participating species, Exthos announced, his cybernetic arm gleaming as he manipulated the controls. The official histories speak of strategic withdrawals and mutual cessation of hostilities. The truth is something else. The first recording showed a human settlement on the edge of contested space. Simple prefab buildings, basic defensive measures, nothing that should have concerned a professional military force. The timestamp showed 3 days after first contact with a mercenary raid. "Watch," Ilara whispered, her scales rippling with remembered fear. "Watch what they did with just civilian equipment." The settlement transformed before their eyes. Agricultural machinery became mobile armor units. Weather monitoring systems were repurposed into early warning networks. But it wasn't just the physical changes that caught their attention. It was the speed of adaptation. "They learned our tactics," Exthos narrated as the footage continued. "Not just countered them, absorbed them, improved them." The raid lasted less than 6 hours, but by the end, the recording showed human civilians moving with military precision, using modified farming equipment to execute perfect flanking maneuvers. They had taken the raiders' own tactics and evolved them into something new, something uniquely human. Fast forward 3 weeks, Ilara commanded. The display shifted, showing the same settlement. What had been a vulnerable target was now a fortress, but not in any conventional sense. Every defeat, every attack, had been transformed into an improvement. Skray leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. "Those defense towers, they're made from salvaged raid vessels." "Not just made from them," Exthos corrected. "Improved upon. The humans didn't just survive our attacks. They learned from them, evolved with each encounter. Their neural plasticity, their ability to adapt, it's beyond anything we'd encountered." The next footage showed something that made several warriors emit distress pheromones. A human medic, treating plasma burns with improvised equipment and common household items, explaining the process to others even as she worked. "See," she said in the recording, "the molecular structure is similar to cooking oil. We can use that too." They turned our weapons against us, Cathal realized, not by stealing them, but by understanding them, learning them, making them better. Exthos nodded grimly. "Now look at our current situation." He switched the display to their surveillance of Miller's operation. "Notice anything familiar?" The patterns were unmistakable. Every system they'd observed, every piece of equipment Miller handled, showed the same rapid evolution. He wasn't just using technology. He was engaging with it, improving it, teaching it new purposes. "The coffee maker," Vevkskar said suddenly. "He didn't just rebuild our probe. He's using it to learn our preferences, our biology. Each cup is an experiment in optimization." "Exactly," Exthos confirmed. "Even now, as we watch him, he's studying us, learning, adapting. Those mining patterns we observed, they're not just for resource extraction. He's been testing soil composition, structural integrity, tactical advantages, all while making it look like routine work." The display shifted to current footage of Miller's facility. The human was casually reinstalling a power coupling, but now they could see the true complexity of his movements. Every action served multiple purposes. Every repair was also an upgrade. "Sir," their intelligence officer interrupted, "you need to see this." Analysis of his communication patterns suggests he's been using the mining operations vibrations to map the entire region. He knows every cave system, every mineral deposit, every potential tactical position, and he's been doing it since day one. The final piece of war footage played, showing a human settlement that had survived 6 consecutive raids. It hadn't just survived, it had evolved into something new, something that combined technologies from a dozen species into uniquely human configurations. "Now you understand," Exthos said quietly, "why humans are blacklisted by most mercenary guilds. It's not their strength or their technology. It's their endless capacity to learn, to adapt, to—" He paused, searching for the right word. "To befriend," Yilera finished. "Even their enemies become teachers. And Miller's been teaching us the whole time." In the distance, through their command center sensors, they could hear Miller whistling as he worked, every note carrying the weight of centuries of human evolution and adaptation. They weren't facing a target anymore. They were facing humanity's greatest weapon, the ability to turn everything, even defeat, into progress. The Brotherhood's formal surrender was unprecedented in their 1,000-year history. Even more unprecedented was the response, an invitation to a barbecue. "Come on in," Miller called out as the elite mercenary unit approached his facility, their weapons ceremonially powered down. "Hope everyone likes Texas-style brisket. Been smoking it for 16 hours in a modified plasma converter." Exthos led his warriors through the facility's entrance, now recognizing the subtle defenses hidden within its seemingly simple design. Every support beam could become a barrier. Every corridor offered multiple escape routes. The entire structure was a masterpiece of tactical engineering disguised as a mining operation. "Beers in the cooler," Miller announced, emerging from what they now realized was a combination kitchen and command center. Had to adjust the formula a bit for Krithak biology, but the principles of fermentation are pretty universal. The human looked exactly like his file photo, complete with the disarming smile that Exthos now understood was as much a weapon as any plasma cannon. He wore his environmental suit like casual clothing, modifications and improvements visible to their trained eyes. "So," Miller said, handing out bottles of custom-brewed beer, "about that contract on my head. Guessing you figured out I'm not actually a simple mining operator." "Deep cover operative," Exthos confirmed, accepting a bottle. His sensors indicated the beverage was perfectly calibrated for Krithak taste receptors. "Investigation into the Brotherhood's client." Miller grinned, flipping a piece of meat on what he called a barbecue pit, actually a repurposed mineral scanner that now produced the most enticing aromas they'd ever encountered. Galactic Anti-Smuggling Task Force. Your client's been running more than just contraband. We're talking banned bioweapons, prohibited AI cores, the nasty stuff. Lara, already on her second beer, clicked her mandibles appreciatively. The mining operation. It's a surveillance post. Got it in one. Miller cheerfully confirmed. Every excavation gives me access to their hidden transport routes. Been mapping their network for months. Just needed some credible muscle to help with the takedown. He paused, flipping another piece of meat. That's where you folks come in, assuming you're interested in a career change. The Brotherhood warriors exchanged looks. Their client, a suspected smuggler, had hired them to eliminate a lone miner. Instead, they'd found themselves outmaneuvered by a human operative who'd turned their own surveillance mission into a job interview. The pay's better, Miller added casually, and you get dental. Plus, I got some ideas about improving your combat systems. That quantum shift technology you use. Pretty sure we can boost efficiency by at least 60% if we integrate it with some modified mining sensors. Scry, who had been suspiciously examining a device called a cornhole board, looked up. You planned this from the beginning. The displays of strength, the technology demonstrations. More like a mutual evaluation, Miller corrected, serving up plates of perfectly cooked meat. You guys are the best in the business. Just needed to show you a better way to use those skills. Also, wanted to make sure you'd appreciate proper barbecue. Can't trust anyone who doesn't respect a well-smoked brisket. Exthos found himself relaxing despite years of combat instincts. The food was extraordinary, the beer perfect, and the company surprisingly enjoyable. Miller taught them the rules of cornhole, shared stories about Earth's military history, and somehow got the entire Brotherhood singing Country Roads by the end of the night. One question, Exthos asked as the evening wound down. The coffee maker from our probe. Was that really necessary? Miller's eyes twinkled. Best way to show someone your intentions is to take their best technology and turn it into something that brings joy. Old human tradition. Besides, he added, serving another round of drinks, got you all to sit down and talk, didn't it? The former vice commander of the Krithak Brotherhood, now newly appointed Special Operations Director of the Anti-Smuggling Task Force, had to admit the human had a point. They'd come to eliminate a target and found a teacher, an ally, and somehow a friend. To new beginnings, Miller raised his beer, and to proving that the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into family. Now who's ready to learn how to make real chili? As the Brotherhood warriors enthusiastically gathered around Miller's cooking station, actually a modified weapons fabricator, Exthos realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their adaptability or their strength. It was their ability to make everyone around them want to adapt and grow stronger together.